Go ahead, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, where we left off, I believe you were telling us that the quads are generally.
Turn your microphone on, please.
The quads were generally not allowed off the property when guests were driving them, is that correct?
True.
Now, you have been, when you were a security guard for Mr. Jackson, do you know if he considered you one of his best security guards?
I would object. That calls for speculation, without foundation.
The answer is obvious. All right, sustained.
Did Mr. Jackson place any special trust in you when you were a security guard?
Yes.
And one of the things that he did that involved trust was that while he was on tour in '93, he had you personally patrol the hallway to his bedroom to make sure no one entered it. Isn't that true?
I don't recall that.
You don't remember that?
Personally patrol inside.
Inside the main house to make sure no one went in his bedroom when he was not there.
I don't recall that.
When the '93 case was under investigation, additional security was brought in to Neverland Ranch. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And they were known as the OS, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you the last security guard of the previous staff of security, not including the OS, that turned his firearm over to, or actually stopped being armed?
I'm going to object to that question as unintelligible.
Sustained.
I can rephrase it. Were you the last armed security guard on Mr. Jackson's normal staff of security?
I don't know if I was the last. I don't know.
Well, didn't you refuse to turn your gun over at one time when you were asked to turn it over to the head of security?
That's argumentative the way it's phrased.
It's offered as impeachment.
Overruled. You may answer.
Do you know who the head of security was?
Zimmerman. I believe he was your father.
I don't recall.
All right. Do you consider yourself a loyal employee of Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
And you previously testified that he's the person who gives you your instructions for your job at Neverland?
Yes.
Do you take any orders from Dieter Weisner?
I'm going to object to the term, orders, as vague.
I'll rephrase that. That's fair. In terms of your duties as the ranch manager of Neverland Ranch, do you take orders from Dieter Weisner?
I would take requests from Dieter Weisner and address them as needed.
And those requests would be the normal requests of a guest, true?
True.
But as far as policies and procedures at Neverland Ranch, Dieter Weisner doesn't tell you what to do, true?
True.
And neither does Mark Schaffel?
True.
Neither does Frank Cassio?
True.
Or Vinny Amen?
True.
Or Hamid Moslehi?
True.
Ronald Konitzer?
True.
That's because Mr. Jackson is the only person who can tell you how to handle policies and procedures at Neverland Ranch, correct?
Correct.
Have you reviewed any documents in this case in your preparation for your testimony?
Yes.
Which documents?
The document the investigator let me see before.
I'm sorry?
It was a document of what I was to testify to.
You were given a document regarding what you were to testify to?
No, what I had testified, what I had stated in an interview with the investigator.
An investigator who was working for Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
How many documents did you review?
It was just my statement. I think it was a page and a half.
Just one statement?
Yes.
How many times have you been interviewed in this case by Mr. Jackson's investigators?
That was it.
Just one time?
Yes.
And was that in November of, I'm sorry. Was that in the early part of 2004?
No.
Who was the investigator that interviewed you?
Jesus Castillo.
Was he the only investigator that has interviewed you in relation to this case?
I believe so.
Haven't you been interviewed by Eric Mason?
No.
You've never been interviewed in regards to this case by Eric Mason?
I've spoken with Eric Mason, but I have not officially been interviewed by him.
Didn't you testify on August 20, 2004, at a hearing in this case that you were interviewed by Eric Mason?
I believe it was off the record, and I was not actually interviewed.
I see. So Eric Mason, do you know who he is?
Yes.
He's a private investigator who works for Mr. Jackson.
That's correct.
He had a private interview with you that was, quote, off the record.
Yes.
Is that what he said?
That was my understanding of it, yes.
Did Mr. Mason say that, this interview is off the record?
I don't recall.
But that was your understanding?
I didn't actually physically sit down with Eric Mason.
And he didn't take any notes at that meeting, did he?
I don't believe so.
And he didn't record it, did he?
I don't believe so.
And no one else was present, were they?
No.
And you knew at the time Mr. Mason was working for Mr. Jackson, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware of the charges against your employer?
Yes.
And you were present when a search warrant was executed at Neverland Ranch on November 18, 2003?
Yes.
And you were interviewed by law enforcement in this case?
Yes.
Did you tell the truth in that interview?
Yes.
You were completely honest with the interviewer?
Objection. Argumentative and asked and answered.
Sustained.
You were aware at the time that this interview was tape recorded?
Yes.
Did you tell the interviewer that Mr. Jackson had no security for his room except for a key?
I don't recall.
Did you tell the interviewer that alcohol has been served only 2 times in the history of Neverland at events there?
That's correct.
Is that true?
I believe that to be true.
It's only been served 2 times in the history of Neverland?
At events.
Objection.
I believe events was the key word.
I'll withdraw it.
What qualifies as an event?
More than 5 people, 10 people.
Okay, so a dinner party. Never been served at a dinner party?
No, I didn't say that. I said, event.
More than 5 people?
A scheduled event.
Okay, a dinner party with more than 5 people?
Yes, alcohol would be served at dinner if somebody wanted some wine, that is correct.
Okay.
The children's parties? No, those are.
I'm not asking about children's parties.
Okay.
Objection. Argumentative. The witness was answering the question.
Overruled.
And do you, let me strike that. Do you have any knowledge of Mr. Jackson drinking alcohol himself?
Yes.
You've seen him drink alcohol?
No.
You have never seen Michael Jackson drink alcohol?
Personally, no.
You said that when you met, that you knew of the Arvizo family at that interview, correct?
That is correct.
But you said, when questioned about the family, you said, honestly, I only met the wife or the mother. Was that a true statement?
Objection.
I'll back up. I should have asked a predicate. Did you say that you had only met the wife or the mother of the Arvizo family?
I believe that to be true, that I had not met the father.
Well, you understood the question, family included the entire family, didn't you?
Objection. Argumentative and calls for hearsay.
Overruled. You may answer. Do you want the question read?
Yes.
Well, you understood the question, family included the entire family, didn't you?
Yes.
And was it true when you said, honestly, I only met the wife or the mother? Is that a true statement?
With regard to the father, that is true. I have not met the father.
But you understood the question included the entire family, correct?
We can go back and forth here. I'm telling you what I recall.
Well, do you recall that the question was, who's included in that family? How many kids, parents, names, etc.? Do you recall that being the question when you said, honestly, I only met the wife or the mother?
I'm going to object. This is hearsay and it's improper impeachment.
Overruled.
Do you recall that being the question when you gave that answer?
I don't recall that to be the question or the exact question.
Did the kids ever stay at Neverland without their mother?
Yes.
Did you know that to be true when you gave this interview?
Yes.
In the interview, didn't you specifically state, the kids never stayed there without their mother?
I don't recall.
Mr. Marcus, when you gave this interview, weren't you trying to distance yourself from the facts of this case and protect your employer, Michael Jackson?
Objection. Argumentative and compound.
I'll sustain the objection as argumentative.
You mentioned that you took this family, the mother and the children at least, to the dentist?
That's correct. Actually, the orthodontist.
Orthodontist. And you took them there because?
I did not take them there.
I'm sorry?
I met them there.
I'm sorry. Did you arrange that meeting with the orthodontist?
Yes.
And you arranged that meeting because the two boys were suffering from pain related to their braces, correct?
That's part of the story that I heard, yes.
Isn't that what you told the interviewer?
Yes.
You didn't tell them anything else other than the fact that the boys were having pain and they needed to go to the orthodontist immediately?
Correct.
And you called the orthodontist, correct?
Yes.
You picked that orthodontist?
It was recommended to me.
Okay. You made an appointment?
Yes.
And you specifically made an appointment after the orthodontist's office would be closed for business, true?
Correct.
What time did you make that appointment for?
6 or 7 p.m. I don't know exactly what time.
And then Vinny took them to the orthodontist, true?
Vinny met me at the orthodontist, correct.
But Vinny was transporting the Arvizo family, true?
Yes, he was.
Did you arrange for that?
They were on their way back from Santa Maria, so we met there.
Did you arrange for Vinny to take the Arvizo family to the orthodontist?
Did I personally arrange it? No.
You didn't talk to Vinny?
Yes.
So did you arrange with Vinny to meet you at the orthodontist?
Yes.
I'm going to object. That's argumentative and that's a different question.
Overruled. The answer was yes. Next question.
And the Arvizo family, during that meeting, was never outside either your presence or Vinny's presence, as far as you know, correct?
Not correct.
When were they outside your presence or Vinny? Well, let me break that up. Were they outside your presence?
Yes.
When was that?
While they were in the operating room or I was in the lobby. They were in the back room.
But they were in the same building, correct?
Yes.
And you sat there for about an hour and a half?
Correct.
Can you tell us why you sat there for an hour and a half reading magazines?
It was pouring down rain. They needed a ride back. I didn't know how long the procedure was going to take.
And why did you meet them there at the same time that the appointment was to begin?
I arranged the appointment, and I was going to pay for the appointment.
But the payment would be at the end of the appointment?
I didn't know I don't believe we had agreed upon a price at that point, possibly.
Was Neverland Valley Ranch on a skeleton crew at this time, in February of 2003?
No.
Do you know who International Business Management is?
International Business Management. No.
Did you ever contact anyone complaining that Neverland Valley is on a skeleton crew and that you were concerned about safety in the month of February 2003?
Objection. Beyond the scope of direct.
Overruled. You may answer.
Who was that International Business Management? What is the name?
My question is, did you ever complain to anybody that Neverland Valley Ranch was on a skeleton crew during the month of February 2003, and that you were very concerned about safety?
I don't recall.
That's possible that you might have done that?
It's possible.
Calls for speculation.
Overruled. The answer was, it's possible. Next question.
So my question was Neverland Valley Ranch on a skeleton crew at that time?
Apparently it was possible.
Do you have any knowledge of children sleeping in Mr. Jackson's room?
Yes.
On the interview that you had with the investigator at the time of the search warrant, you specifically said you had no knowledge of children sleeping in Mr. Jackson's room, didn't you, Mr. Marcus?
That's correct.
That was untrue, wasn't it?
Yes.
So you weren't honest in that interview, were you, as you just testified?
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
I'll strike that. In terms of the question regarding whether or not the Arvizo children were allowed to leave the ranch, you ordered security not to let Gavin and Star and Devellin off of the Neverland Ranch property, didn't you?
No, I don't believe that to be true.
You don't believe it to be true?
Ordered? You're saying I ordered someone.
Gave a directive to the security staff not to let those children off of the property, correct?
I believe that yes.
You did do that?
Yes.
And that order was placed on a grease board in the security office, wasn't it?
I don't know about that, no. The only order I know of is the one that we saw today.
Well, you just testified that you ordered security not to let those children off the property. How did you do that?
I believe it was in writing on the overhead that we saw earlier.
My question is, how did you do that, Mr. Marcus? How did you make that order? How did you communicate that order to the security staff? That's my question.
The phone.
You called who?
Probably the officer that was at the gate.
And at least one time you made that order at 5:52 p.m. on February 19, 03, correct?
I'm going object to the question is misstating the evidence, at least one time.
Overruled. You may answer.
Can you repeat the question?
I'll have it read back.
I just don't have the date in front of me, so.
That's fine.
And at least one time you made that order at 5:52 p.m. on February 19, 03, correct?
If that's what the document says that's in your hand, then that is correct.
Could I have the Elmo, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Marcus, I'd like to show you that document again. For the record, it's Exhibit 334, Bates number MJ00154. Okay, can you read that?
Yes.
I'd like you to go down to 1740, the notation that, Hill House Garage is going to be left unlocked per Jesus. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then under that, it said, Hamid is going up there. So does that mean at 5:40 Hamid is going up to the Hill House Garage?
That's what it appears.
And then under that, approximately 12 minutes later, there's the notation, the kids are not to leave per Joe. Kids, meaning like Gavin, Star, etc.
That's correct.
Is that when you made that directive to security that the kids are not to leave?
Did I call them at 1752? I don't know.
Okay. Would it be the policy of the security guard to make that notation when you made that call?
It would be the policy, yes, but it's not always the case.
Okay. But the reason why they have a number next to that, the 1752, that's to connote the time that you made that order?
That's correct.
Okay. So 12 minutes after Hamid arrives, you decide that the kids are not to leave the property, true?
That is true.
And your testimony is that your reason for that is because you were concerned about the kids at that moment driving off the property driving an automobile? Is that the reason why you made that order?
I also stated that there was a documentary going on, and it was undecided where the location was going to be that it was going to take place.
Okay. Who told you about this documentary?
Hamid.
Okay. So Hamid arrived and told you that he was going to take the kids off the property?
That is correct.
And you told Hamid, the kids are not allowed to leave the property, didn't you?
Their mother was not on property and, yes, I did.
Okay. So
I do not believe their mother was on property.
So you were not going to allow those kids off the property, no matter what?
Objection. Argumentative and vague.
I'll strike that. So now you're adding another reason. It's the mother wasn't on the property. Is that the reason why you wouldn't allow them off the property at that time?
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
Mr. Marcus, Gavin Arvizo and Star Arvizo never drove a full-sized automobile on the Neverland Valley Ranch property, did they?
No, that is not true.
Did you personally observe them driving an automobile on Neverland?
No.
Do you know of anybody, by name, who saw Gavin and Star Arvizo driving on the Neverland Valley property?
Yes.
Who?
I believe Jesus Solace let me know that they had driven it back from a van, actually, from the theater. And that was obviously a concern.
A van from the dealer?
The theater.
Oh, the theater. Okay. And you were concerned that a 13-year-old boy would drive a van or some full-sized vehicle to the gate and that, unless you told the security guards not to let him out, they would just say, "Open the gates, have a nice drive." Is that what your concern was?
My concern was, it is not uncommon for a vehicle, if it's one of the primary vehicles that have tinted windows, if somebody were to pull up, some guards would just automatically open the gates. So, yes, I would want them to know who was in the vehicle.
Isn't it a fact that they don't let any of the ranch vehicles out unless they know who's driving them?
That is not true.
Aren't there notations in this very log where employees attempted to drive out of Neverland Ranch and they were stopped and detained because they didn't have authorization?
They attempt. But it's not always the case. I've driven off property many times with.
Well, 13-year-olds are not allowed to drive on Neverland property, right?
They do.
But, I mean, the security guards know this, true?
The security guards try to limit them.
When Jesus told you about Gavin driving the van on Neverland property, Jesus told you that Jesus was in the van with Gavin at the time, didn't he? Isn't that true?
No, that's not true. I don't recall that to be the case.
Is there any notation anywhere in the Neverland documents, security records, logs, anywhere that indicates Gavin or Star Arvizo drove a Neverland vehicle?
I believe you have the documents, so I don't know that to be true or not.
I'm asking you what you know.
I don't know.
Objection. Argumentative.
Overruled. Next question.
And after this driving incident, you continued to keep the keys to these vehicles in the vehicles themselves. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why?
Convenience.
Convenience was more important than safety?
Objection. Argumentative.
It's a fair question.
Sustained.
You said that you've never seen anything inappropriate at Neverland. Is that correct, involving children?
Inappropriate, yes.
Now, you have full access to the entire property, correct?
Yes.
You have access to Mr. Jackson's room?
With permission, yes.
Yes. You have access to his office?
With permission, yes.
You've been in his office?
Yes.
Children are in his office?
That's correct.
Children are in his room?
Correct.
You've seen pornography, or, excuse me, you've seen adult erotic materials at Neverland Ranch, correct?
Yes.
And have you seen adult erotic materials in Mr. Jackson's room?
No.
Have you seen adult erotic materials in areas where Mr. Jackson allows children to be?
No.
Do you know if Mr. Jackson possesses adult erotic materials?
Lack of foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
You know that he does possess adult erotic materials?
Oh, no, I don't know that he does.
You have no knowledge of that?
Have I gone out and bought them for him? No. Do I know that he owns them? I haven't seen them with him, no.
Well, you've been in his office numerous times, true?
Yes.
I'm showing you Exhibit 779. Do you consider these adult erotic materials, Mr. Marcus? Yes? Do you?
No. I mean, yes, they are. They're artwork, but
You keep looking at Mr. Jackson. Why is that?
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
Okay, so you admit that these are adult erotic materials?
Asked and answered.
Sustained.
And you have seen these before, haven't you?
yes.
And they are on Mr. Jackson's desk in his office?
That is correct.
And they are there when children are allowed to come into his office?
That is correct.
Alright, thank you. I have no further questions.
I think you've left some things up here, and I'll let you.
I'm sorry.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Marcus, the figurines that you just were shown. How big are those figurines? Do you know? Do you remember actually seeing them as opposed to seeing the pictures?
Probably 10, well, I don't know, 16 inches.
And where are these figurines located?
I believe they're on his desk.
And what else is on his desk?
Lots of other stuff.
Again, says his desk messy?
Yes.
Alright, let's go back to a couple things here. First of all, let's talk about interviews for a second. You were interviewed by the Los Angeles Police Department in 1993, is that correct?
I don't recall that, but if that is.
That's right. I think I asked you if you were interviewed by law enforcement. You remembered that, but not which department it was, is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember there being a detective by the name of Rose Ferrufino?
No.
Were you interviewed by a woman detective at that time? Do you remember at all?
I don't recall.
In any event, whatever you did, you cooperated at that time with the interview, is that right?
I believe so.
Okay, now, you were also interviewed on November the 18th of 2003, is that right?
That's correct.
Were you there when the officers arrived at the ranch in the morning?
No.
Alright, did somebody call you to come in or did you just come in your regular time?
Yeah, I just arrived a little bit after that.
And you were at that time, November 18th, 2003, the ranch manager, correct?
Yes.
Was this something you expected to happen?
No.
Okay, did it upset the routine that you had planned for that day?
Objection. Relevance.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes, definitely.
Can you describe the state of things at the ranch? Just sort of describe what was happening.
Well, there was 70 officers going in every different direction doing what they wanted at that point in time, and it caused me concern because we had about 60 employees on property. And I wanted to, number one concern was the employees, to make sure that they were obviously taken care of or if they needed anything. I wasn't exactly sure what was really going on at that exact moment.
Okay, and when this group of officers arrived, did they pretty much all arrive at once?
I believe so.
Okay.
They arrived before I did.
Alright, so by the time you got there, was it pretty overwhelming?
Yes.
Now, were there also guests on the property?
Yes.
Did you have concern for the guests?
Yes.
Objection. Leading.
Overruled. Next question.
Did you attempt to respond to requests from the various officers?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled.
Yes.
Okay, thinking back to that day, what sorts of things were you being asked about or asked to do?
Open certain buildings that they needed access to.
Alright, and did you attempt to accommodate those requests?
If I had the key available, yes.
Alright, were you also, when you said you were dealing with employees, what sorts of things were you doing with some of the employees?
I mainly wanted to know that they were. I wasn't sure if the employees were allowed to leave the property at that point or if they had to stay. And I was trying to figure out if that was an option, if some of the employees could leave. Some of them were uncomfortable with being there for whatever reason. It was just a stressful morning, obviously.
And what did the police officers or the sheriff's officers do, sheriffs and district attorneys investigators? What did they do with regard to the employees?
Objection. Vague. Relevance.
Sustained.
Which ground?
Relevance.
May I, Your Honor?
All right.
In just one word explain? Has to do with his interview.
All right. I'll allow the question.
Thank you. What did they do with the employees in general?
They would interview them or speak with them, get their information. Some were in different areas, so there was different officers with different employees.
Okay, and did you make arrangements to send some of the people back to work?
Yeah, I thought that if they wanted to stay, then, yes.
And did you try to comply with all the office's requests with regards to interviews?
Yes.
Did you personally submit to an interview yourself?
Yes.
And you were aware it was tape recorded, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you were being interviewed, was that after everybody else left and it was all calm, or how were things going at the time?
No, it was about 11 o'clock, I believe, and
11 a.m.?
yeah, 11 a.m., so it was only 2 hours into it. They were there until 10 o'clock, I believe, p.m.
Was it calm or chaotic, or what was going on around that time?
Yeah, it was chaotic. The whole day was obviously chaotic.
And did you have a radio?
Yes.
Is that something you carry around in the normal course of your duties at the ranch?
Yes.
Why did you carry a radio?
To communicate with the employees and to be accessible.
Alright, were people on the radio to you seeking guidance and expressing concerns during this period of time?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, in fact, while you were being interviewed, you asked permission to answer the radio several times. Is that correct?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
That is correct.
Alright, and did the officers let you answer your radio?
Yes.
Alright, now, in the middle of this, when you were giving the interview, did you remember all the names of the Arvizo family as you were sitting there?
I was extremely overwhelmed at the moment, and no, I did not.
Did the officers eventually tell you the names of the Arvizo family members?
I believe it was on the warrant, I guess, if you will. So, yes.
But you went over the Arvizo family members with the officers, is that correct?
Yes.
And they asked you about the father. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you remember telling them whether or not you had seen the father?
I don't believe I've ever met the father. I might have seen him, but I don't know if I've ever met him. If so, it was a long time ago.
Okay, and that's what you told them, right?
Yes.
Now, as far as the mother was concerned, did you tell them that you had met Janet Arvizo?
Yes.
You told them that you had. Did you tell them that you had met the children?
Yes.
Did you tell them where the mother usually stayed?
I believe so. I don't know if that came up. I know that she stayed in the guest units.
Okay. Did one of the officers ask you if the children had ever stayed in the arcade, slept in the arcade?
Possibly.
Did the children ever sleep in the arcade?
There's no sleeping quarters in the arcade, so I wouldn't think so.
Alright. Now, did you tell that you were asked a question by Mr. Auchincloss about whether or not you said that the children, the Arvizo children, had slept in Mr. Jackson's room? I believe that was the question that was asked. Do you have personal knowledge? Have you seen the children sleeping in Mr. Jackson's room?
I don't recall that question being asked.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you recall the Arvizo children actually sleeping in Mr. Jackson's room? In other words, did you see them sleeping in Mr. Jackson's room? Forget about what you were asked. Let me start over. I'm asking you right now. Did you ever see the Arvizo children sleeping in Mr. Jackson's room?
I don't believe so.
Alright, did you? Were you aware, through your duties and in the course of what you were doing, that the Arvizo children were sleeping in the house?
Yes.
Did you assume that they were probably sleeping in Mr. Jackson's quarters?
I didn't assume, but there is an extra room in the suite, so, yes, they could have been.
Alright, and about how long was your interview that day with the police, the sheriff's and DA's investigators at the ranch on November 18, 2003?
About an hour and a half, I think. An hour maybe.
Now, you were also asked about whether or not you were interviewed by various people. Let's start with Eric Mason. Do you know who Eric Mason actually worked for?
Ultimately, I believe Mr. Jackson.
Alright, first of all, is Mr. Mason a licensed private investigator?
I don't know.
Okay, where is he from? Do you have any idea?
I believe he lives in the Bay Area.
Okay, do you know whether or not he has an office up there?
I believe so.
Have you ever seen the name of his office or his firm?
No.
Okay, now, do you know if Mr. Mason was working for an attorney or attorneys as an investigator?
I believe so.
Okay, when you say ultimately for Mr. Jackson, do you know whether or not he was working for the attorneys or if he was employed directly by Mr. Jackson?
I don't know.
Have you seen Mr. Mason in the company of any attorneys over the years?
Yeah.
Okay, which attorneys?
I believe Mark Garrigus, yourself. Do you mean they're together?
Yeah. Do you know if, for instance, do you know Steve Cochran?
Yes.
Okay, and who does he work for?
Are we talking firm, or?
Yes, his firm. Do you know the firm?
Rosenman. I'm just not sure on the rest of it.
Okay, a firm that includes the name Rosenman, is that correct?
Yes.
And where is that firm located?
In Los Angeles.
Do you know if Mr. Mason was working for Mr. Cochran in that firm?
I think so.
Alright. You mentioned you'd seen me over the years, is that right?
Yes.
And during the period of time in recent years that you've been the ranch manager, have you been responsible for making arrangements for the attorneys and investigators to come to the ranch for various purposes associated with the case?
Yes.
Did you make an effort to avoid being involved in any substantive discussions while attorneys and investigators were there?
Objection. Leading.
Sustained.
Would you be interviewed whenever attorneys or investigators would come to the ranch?
No.
What would happen, generally?
Generally, we would just go about our business, whatever needed to happen with regard to if it was. They were there for, it was more or less I was just there to assist them if they needed something, an area opened or, just mainly to assist them if they needed something.
So you've met Mr. Mesereau before, I take it?
Yes.
You met Miss Yu?
Yes.
Now, as far as being interviewed about this case, as far as defense investigators, somebody representing Mr. Jackson, you referred to about a page. And I think you said it was a page or a page and a half interview that you reviewed earlier. Is that right?
Yes.
And who was the investigator who actually did the interview of you for that report?
Jesus Castillo.
Jesus Castillo. And is Mr. Castillo a licensed private investigator, to your knowledge?
I believe so.
Okay. Where is he from?
Here in Santa Maria.
Alright. He has an office here in Santa Maria?
Yes.
Did Mr. Castillo tell you what to say?
No.
What did he do?
He asked me, number 1, he subpoenaed me. Number 2, he let me see the report, if you will, and I was at his office for 15 minutes. It was.
Okay. That was recently, to get you here.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Before that, there's a report that you reviewed that had to do with your testimony, you said.
Uh-huh.
So my question is, how did that report come about? Was that as a result of you talking to somebody?
With Jesus.
There you go. Okay. Do you remember when that was that you talked with Jesus?
Just recently. 2 months ago maybe.
And so 2 months ago was the first time you sat down and were actually interviewed by an investigator about this case?
That's correct.
Now, back in 93, were you formally interviewed by anybody that you can remember?
I don't recall.
Did Eric Mason ever make any effort to have some kind of secretive talks with you?
No.
Alright, so when you talked to any investigators or lawyers, did you speak honestly, whatever the context was, with any of the defense lawyers or investigators?
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to other questions that you were asked. You talked about having codes programmed into the phone, right?
Yes.
First of all, are guests at the ranch instructed on how to use the phone?
Yes.
Objection. Foundation.
Sustained.
Okay, to your knowledge, you're the ranch manager. Based on your knowledge of ranch operations, is it policy to advise or instruct guests on how to use the phone?
Yes.
Alright, and have you personally either done so yourself or witnessed other employees instruct guests on how to use the phone?
Yes.
Are you asked from time to time how to use the phone?
Yes.
Do you ever deny guests the information as to how to use the phone?
No.
Now, you talked about 2 different situations, one being the 3-digit entry.
Yes.
And you said it can be any 3 digits?
That's correct.
So basically you get one of these phones and you have to push a button to get a line. You hit the digits and that gives you an open line. You hit that button and you can call out, is that right?
That's correct.
And if anybody ever asked you how to do that, you would tell them, right?
Yes.
And you believe that there's some of the phones, let me withdraw that. Do you have any question as to whether or not some of the phones are accessible without the 3-digit code?
That is true.
So you're not absolutely certain which phones are which, is that right?
Exactly.
And you believe that the phones in the guest quarters do not need the 3 digits?
Objection. Misstates the evidence, leading.
Overruled.
I believe that to be true.
Alright, now, let's put it this way. If somebody were in the guest units, and they were able to call from the guest units to somebody in Los Angeles, they would either have to have a phone without the code or they would have to know the code, correct?
Correct.
And if they were able to get that outside line and make a call to people in Los Angeles, they could call 911, is that correct?
That's correct.
And by calling 911, they'd actually get the outside 911 dispatch center, is that right?
That's correct.
Is it also possible to call security for an emergency?
That is correct.
And how would you do that?
You would use the intercom to call the front gate. They're there 24 hours a day.
Alright, so if there's ever an emergency of any sort, you can call. You can call for security and they'll respond, is that right?
That's correct.
You mentioned that there were a number of things set up in the ranch by Mr. Jackson that involved games and entertainment and that sort of thing, is that correct?
Yes.
Are they just for children?
No.
Do adults also partake of the various video games and rides and other things at the ranch?
Yes.
Do adults seem to enjoy it as well?
Yes.
By the way, before I turn my page here, I'll go back to the telephone calls for a second. To your knowledge, as the ranch manager and having reviewed all the records of the ranch, and based on any information you received from department heads or anybody else at the ranch whatsoever, is there any indication whatsoever that Janet Arvizo was in any way restricted from using any telephone at that ranch?
Objection. Foundation.
Sustained.
Alright, now, you were asked by Mr. Auchincloss about special bonds with different people and he asked about young boys, I think, in his own words. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
Did Mr. Jackson have any special bonds with young girls?
Yes.
Can you recall? Well, I don't want to go and list the names here unnecessarily, but do you recall any Casio children?
Yes.
Who would that be?
Marie Nicole.
How about the Culkin family?
Objection. Leading.
Sustained.
Well, you were asked about. Let me see here. You were asked specifically. May we approach for a moment? I just have a technical issue on this.
All right. Discussion held off the record at sidebar.
Okay. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Were there other girls who were family members? Let me withdraw that. Were there other girls who visited the ranch?
Yes.
And did other girls besides Marie Nicole seem to have a special bond with Mr. Jackson and vice versa?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
And who were they, the best you can recall? Do you recall some names?
I don't recall the names of each individual child, no, but some of the Culkin kids. Carly Barnes. I don't recall exact names now.
Okay, but were there girls involved in activities?
Yes.
Now, were there also adult women who had a special bond with Mr. Jackson?
Objection. Well, I'll withdraw that objection.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, besides the women to whom he was married, were there other women who seemed to be particularly close friends with Mr. Jackson?
It appeared to be, yes.
Okay, do you recall the names of any of those particular individuals?
Besides his wives?
Yeah.
He has friends. Elizabeth Taylor. I'm drawing a blank on a few of the names, but.
You need to speak up just a little. You're trailing off there. You said Elizabeth Taylor, and you drew a blank on the others?
Yeah, there's other women, I just don't.
Alright, okay, alright. Now, just picking up, again, on questions that you were asked here. You were asked about Frank Casio having a desk. Was there a desk that he was allowed to use at the ranch?
Yes.
Alright, do you know if anybody assigned it to him or if he just started using it?
He went and bought it.
Oh, he bought it?
Okay.
And where did he put this desk?
In the video library.
Alright, now, the video library is up above the garage, is that correct?
Correct.
Can you describe the video library itself, just briefly? What does it look like?
It's filled with videos and DVDs, laser discs, all different titles.
Are they arranged? Does it look?
Yes.
How is it arranged?
By category.
Alright, sort of like a Blockbuster? If you walk in there, the same kind of shelves?
Yeah, you can go to the comedy section or horror section, cartoon section, yes.
And is there a small living area at the west end of that video library?
Yes.
And describe that very briefly.
It's a couch, a massage chair, a bed. Actually, the couch turns into a bed, and a kitchen area and video equipment to watch movies.
Alright, and do guests sometimes stay there?
Yes.
Alright, now, and did Frank Casio sometimes stay there?
Yes.
Did other people sometimes stay there?
Yes.
Where was this desk that Frank Casio bought? Where did he put that desk in this?
I believe it was at the other end of the building.
So the East End?
The East End, yes.
So you got the video library. That is kind of like Blockbuster, in the middle?
Uh-huh.
And you have the little kitchenette and a convertible sofa on the West End?
Exactly.
And on the East End there's a little cove, and the desk was stuck there. Is that right?
Yes. Next to the restroom.
And was this a full-fledged office where this desk was placed, or was it a big office with chairs?
No.
And all that? Just describe it.
One chair, fax machine, computer.
Alright, now, you were asked about Vinny being there as much as Frank. Was Frank sometimes there when Vinny was not there?
Yes.
And we're talking about February and March of 2003, okay?
Uh-huh.
How often was Frank there and Vinny not there?
I don't recall.
You recall that it happened, but just not the frequency?
Yeah.
And from February the 7th, let's say, to March the 12th, that period of time, was Frank always at the ranch during that period of time?
I don't know if he was there every day.
Okay, you can check the logs and that might help you make that determination. Is that right?
Yes.
Was Vinny ever there during that period of time when Frank wasn't there?
I don't recall.
Alright, now, when you were a security guard, there was something asked about your being armed. Did you have a guard card at that time?
Yes.
What is a guard card?
It authorized you to carry a weapon here in the state of California.
And do you need to have a guard card, to your knowledge, on private property?
I don't believe so.
Okay, but you had one anyway?
Yes.
And did you have to qualify?
Yes.
At the time when you were carrying a weapon. Let me stop that for a second and ask this. At this point in time, nobody carries a weapon out there. Is that correct?
Correct.
At the time when you were carrying a weapon in the early 90s at the ranch, did you feel that it was an appropriate thing to do?
At that point, yes.
And this is a ranch we've heard about. Are there unimproved portions of this ranch?
Yes.
Are there areas where you will go up into the hills and into brush and
Yes.
tree areas, that sort of thing?
Yes.
As part of the security job, would you have to go into those areas from time to time?
Yes.
Now, since that time, things have worked out okay without being armed. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you have good radio communication now, in the last few years?
Yes.
So if you encounter a problem or anybody on the ranch encounters a problem, they can call security to back them up?
Yes.
What's the response time usually, if you're in the main area of the ranch, if somebody puts out an emergency call for security?
Couple of minutes.
There was a question about alcohol being served. Is it true or not that alcohol was only served at 2 events prior to your interview in 2003?
When we say event, I'm talking like a large group of children or group of people that come to the property. So, yes, a wedding or something of that nature.
And when you say event at your job, that takes on a particular meaning. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's not just Mr. Jackson having friends over for dinner?
No.
Okay, and for events, what do you generally have to do if you're going to have an event there? In other words, do you have to get special equipment, put tents up, do things like that?
Yes. Yes.
And so your recollection that there were 2 events, do you remember what events they were?
I believe the Brito party of 2000. I think it was 2003. Or 2, actually. And there was probably 2 weddings that wine was served.
Alright, and since you were there when the ranch was purchased by Mr. Jackson, was it purchased furnished?
I believe so, yes.
And was part of what was purchased a collection of wine?
Yes.
Has that collection of wine been depleted since the purchase of the property?
Objection. Relevancy.
Overruled. You may answer.
I believe there's still some, but most of it has, yes, been consumed.
And that, let me withdraw that. Okay, let's talk about the orthodontist. You were asked some questions about that. Is it your understanding that Mr. Jackson ultimately paid for the orthodontic work that was done on the Arvizo children?
Yes.
Do you know how much it was?
I believe it was about $700 or $800. 750, possibly.
You were asked about the request that was made by Mrs. Arvizo, Janet Arvizo, for orthodontic care for her children. Can you describe that in more detail? What was requested?
I believe the children's.
All object. Hearsay.
Foundation.
Okay. You were asked what reason was given for the orthodontic care or the request for the orthodontic care. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you gave an answer, and then Mr. Auchincloss, I think, interrupted you. Where did you get the information from for that answer? In other words, how did you know that orthodontic care was being requested by Janet Arvizo?
I believe I spoke with Janet on that day.
Alright, and what did she tell you?
That her children's teeth were hurting extremely badly and needed some care. Didn't want to go back to the orthodontist in LA. I believe there was an issue with prior payment. She just wanted to take those braces off and send them back to the orthodontist that originally put them on, I believe.
Alright, did she tell you what she wanted to do with her children's teeth after the braces were removed and sent back to the orthodontist?
Objection. Relevancy. Hearsay.
Sustained.
Alright. In any event, You made the arrangements for her to go to the orthodontist, correct?
Yes.
And was there any particular reason why it was set up at the end of the day?
I believe it was just for convenience. I don't believe that they were on property, and I think it was just easier for the orthodontist as well as for us.
Alright.
I believe we did request to do it after hours.
Okay. Is that the only time you've ever requested local business people or professionals to see ranch guests after hours?
No.
And is there some reason why you do that from time to time?
Just for convenience and obviously just to protect the guests, if you will, if it's somebody that doesn't want to go into a public place at that point.
Alright. Now, on that particular day, you said that Janet Arvizo and all 3 of her children were in Santa Maria with Vinny. I believe that was your answer. Is that correct?
Yes.
What was your understanding of what they were doing in Santa Maria?
Objection. Hearsay. Foundation.
Foundation. Sustained.
How did you know they were in Santa Maria?
I believe they went to get their passport pictures taken.
Objection. Move to strike. Non-responsive.
Sustained. Stricken.
Okay, you answered this question for the district attorney, so I'm just wondering what is your source of information? Did somebody tell you that they were going to Santa Maria for some purpose?
Objection. Hearsay.
Overruled. You may answer that, yes, or no.
I gave them directions to a place that I thought might be able to help them with their passport picture.
Okay, so did that discussion you already told us about take place before Vinny and Janet and the children left?
Yes.
Okay, and then they left, and then you got a call to come and meet them at the orthodontist.
I believe we had arranged it earlier that day, but, yes.
Okay, there was a question about international business management, which has the initials IBM, it turns out. It's not International Business Machines, the famous IBM, I guess. Were you aware of this company, IBM, or International Business Management?
I don't recall. I believe it possibly could have been a business manager.
Okay, were there accounting firms from time to time that handled business management for Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Were there accounting firms that did so for a long period of time, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Alright, more recently, what accounting firm has been handling things over the last couple of years?
Bernstein, Fox and Whitman.
And prior to that, do you remember the name of the accounting firm?
I think it was 1 or 2 that were simultaneous, so I'm not sure on the names.
Okay, was there one that was there for a fairly short period of time?
Yes.
And do you know whether or not that was IBM?
I don't recall.
Alright, in any event, you were asked if you recall talking to somebody there in February of 2003. Do you remember the question?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and you weren't sure. I think that was the answer.
That's correct.
Alright, before February 7th of 2003, from the beginning of January through February 6th of 2003, was Mr. Jackson on the premises?
Objection. Foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
I don't recall. I don't keep track of every day that he's on property.
Okay, thinking back to the beginning. Let me ask you, was there a period of time when Mr. Jackson was in Florida for an extended stay?
Yes.
Do you recall when that was?
I believe it was around Christmas time and before.
Okay, was it before February 2003?
Yes.
Okay, now, when Mr. Jackson is not on the premises, is it necessary to have as much staff power as you would have when he's on the premises?
Not necessarily.
Okay, and if he's on the premises with a number of guests, do you need more staff time than if he's not there at all and there are no guests there?
Yes.
And if he's on the premises and there are a number of guests and you also have some kind of media flurry that you talked about, where there is more interest from the media, do you need to have more staff people than if he's not there? There's no media attention and there are no guests.
Yes.
Alright, now, you mentioned something about adult materials, and we talked about those figurines that Mr. Auchincloss wanted to show you. Did you ever see Mr. Jackson personally in possession of adult materials?
No.
Did you ever see him? Did you ever see adult magazines or books on display in any of the public areas or, I say, public areas, any of the areas where guests would be frequenting?
Not on display, no.
Alright. Now, you were asked some questions about earlier on about the nature of Neverland and its attraction, and Mr. Auchincloss wanted to ask about young boys. Were the attraction?
I'm going to object to the prefatory remarks.
Sustained.
Alright, were the attractions of Neverland oriented towards families?
Yes.
Do you believe it's an appropriate, a nice place for families to visit?
Objection. Calls for a conclusion.
Overruled.
Yes.
No further questions.
Mr. Marcus, in regard to the lack of security at Neverland during February 4, February of 2003, the reason for that is because Mr. Jackson wasn't making his payroll. Isn't that true?
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence and relevance.
Sustained.
Are you, as ranch manager, familiar with the finances, the financial part of operating Neverland?
No.
You have no idea what the expense of running Neverland is.
First of all, asked and answered. And secondly, no foundation. Thirdly, relevance.
Sustained.
You said that Mr. Jackson was not, you've never seen him in personal possession of adult materials. What would you call those figurines that I showed you?
Objection. Argumentative. Asked and answered.
I'll rephrase. Wouldn't you call those figurines that I showed you adult materials?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled.
You may answer.
They strike me as artwork, yes.
They're just artwork? Or adult materials?
It's a type of art.
Objection. Excuse me. Object. Argumentative. Compound.
Overruled. But I really don't have your question.
Yes, I'll rephrase that. My question is, would you consider the figurines that I showed you adult materials?
I consider them a type of artwork.
Do you consider them to be adult materials? I'm not asking you whether they're artwork or not.
I understand your question.
My question is, do you consider them to be adult materials? Yes or no?
A type of artwork of adult nature, yes.
You think it's appropriate for children to be exposed to these type of materials?
No.
You were asked about Mr. Jackson's relationship with young girls. And over your 17-year period at Neverland, you were able to come up with two names that he had a close relationship with young girls, Carly Barnes and Marie Nicole Cassio, correct?
Objection. Argumentative.
Overruled.
And misstates the evidence, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer.
I believe you gave me a list of the boys' names. And I didn't have a list of the females' names, so, no, I don't recall every single person's name, no.
So my question is, you were able to come up with two names. Any more? Is that it? Just two?
Objection. Argumentative. Misstates the evidence. He came up with more than two names, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer.
I'm sure there are others. There was Shane Brando's sister. I don't recall her name.
Go ahead.
I don't recall her first name off the top of my head.
My question is, can you remember any other names?
No.
No. And you were asked about adult women that Mr. Jackson formed a special bond with other than his wives. And you came up with one, Liz Taylor, correct?
Do you mean just friends? People that
I mean a special bond, close relationship with.
Liza Minnelli has been there, and they seem to be good friends.
How many times has Liza Minnelli been there?
I don't recollect.
So we're up to two. Any others?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
When you were interviewed by the investigator at the time of the service of the warrant, you did acknowledge that you knew each one of the Arvizo, each member of the Arvizo family, correct?
I did acknowledge?
Yes.
Yes.
But in the beginning, you acknowledged that you met only the mother, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered.
Counsel went into it.
The objection is overruled.
But in the beginning, you stated that you had only met the mother, correct?
Objection. That misstates the evidence and it's argumentative.
I'll rephrase. At the beginning, you said, honestly, I only met the wife or the mother, correct?
In the beginning I also asked for an attorney to be present and was denied that by Mr. Tom Snedden.
Do you have an attorney in this case?
No.
Have you ever had an attorney in this case?
Yes.
Who paid for that attorney?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Sustained.
Did that attorney tell you not to talk to law enforcement?
Objection. Your Honor, calls for attorney-client privilege. Counsel knows better than that.
Sustained.
There's been testimony to this effect, but nevertheless, I'll move on.
Objection. Your Honor, move to strike counsel's gratuitous remarks.
Well,
And I'd ask the jury be advised.
I'll strike your remarks, counsel. That's inappropriate.
all right.
I think we'll
And for the day?
take a break. To the jury, I'll see you tomorrow. Remember the admonition.